When you're studying the anatomy of a business failure, there's this immense temptation to look for a definitive, quantifiable fracture.
Oh, absolutely. We all want that smoking gun.
Right. A very comforting illusion. Like, we approach it like a medical diagnosis. You look at a struggling supply chain or, a plummeting quarterly revenue report,
Right.
and you sort of expect it to read like an X-ray.
Yeah, you want to just point to a jagged white line on a chart and say, there it is, the algorithm failed, or raw material costs spiked by like 14%.
Exactly. And I think we gravitate toward those hard, tangible metrics because they're legible. They fit neatly into a spreadsheet.
Right. And when a firm faces a crisis, leadership immediately audits the technology or the logistics, the capital allocation. It feels rigorous.
It feels precise. But, and for those of you listening who are currently staring down the barrel of an MBA final exam, this is the cognitive trap you really have to avoid.
It's a huge trap.
It is. Because you're spending your days building these complex financial models, running regressions, looking for the clean numbers that dictate global success. But today, we're setting the X-ray aside.
We have to. The X-ray only captures the skeleton. It completely misses the nervous system.
The nervous system, yes. We're venturing into the much more complex, deeply nuanced world of international human resource management.
Which really is the nervous system of the global firm. I mean, without it, nothing fires correctly.
Well put. So, the overarching mission for our deep dive today is to deconstruct the architecture of IHRM so thoroughly that you, the listener, stop seeing it as just like an administrative HR function.
Yeah, hiring and firing. It's so much more than that.
Right. You need to start seeing it as the primary strategic engine of international business. The goal is for you to walk into that exam room and intuitively grasp the mechanics of global talent deployment.
And to do that, we first have to address a massive paradigm shift in how the market evaluates innovation itself.
Because traditionally, our definition of innovation has been heavily skewed toward the tangible, hasn't it?
Oh, heavily. Product and process innovation. The manufacturing sector has historically just owned this narrative. I mean, if a company invents a faster microchip or implements a more efficient robotic assembly line,
the market instantly recognizes that as a competitive advantage.
Exactly. It's visible, it's patentable, and it immediately scales. You can see it working.
But the sources point us toward a different, perhaps more potent force, driven largely by the service sector, which is organizational innovation.
Right.
This is the premise that optimizing the human element, like how you structure, manage, and deploy your workforce, that creates a measurable compounding increase in productivity.
Better human resource management directly elevates the quality of the goods and services produced, and it often outpaces the competitive advantage of raw technological upgrades.
The difficulty, though, is that organizational innovation is notoriously hard to quantify on a balance sheet until long after the fact.
Yeah, you can't easily patent a corporate culture, or a superior talent integration strategy, yet it dictates survival in the global arena.
So if you need a definitive case study to prove that organizational innovation supersedes technological acquisition, you look at Lenovo in 2004.
Oh, it's the perfect example.
The acquisition of IBM's personal computer division.
Yeah.
For you listening, this is the ultimate anchor example to deploy on your exam when analyzing the strategic weight of HR. Let's construct the context here. It's 2004.
IBM is just an absolute titan of American corporate dominance at this point.
Right, the architect of the modern PC. And Lenovo, a Chinese firm, acquires that PC business for $1.75 billion.
A massive deal.
So a superficial analysis, the X-ray approach we talked about, would suggest Lenovo simply purchased patents, manufacturing facilities, and a recognizable brand name.
A purely technological transfer.
But the sheer existential risk of that acquisition makes the technological aspect almost secondary.
Well, yeah, consider the geopolitical and cultural power dynamics at play there. You have a Chinese corporation executing a takeover of a deeply entrenched, highly prestigious American division.
The probability of catastrophic organizational failure was incredibly high.
Off the charts. I mean, key IBM engineers could have just defected to competitors. The management structure could have paralyzed itself in cultural gridlock.
And the entire value of that $1.75 billion purchase could have evaporated in months due to talent flight.
Right. The tech is useless without the people who know how to iterate on it.
So the true brilliance of Lenovo wasn't the capital outlay. It was the subsequent masterstroke of international human resource management.
They recognized that the technology was useless without the human capital. To stabilize that asset, they didn't impose a conqueror's mentality.
What did they do instead?
They integrated the IBM personnel, the engineers, middle managers, executives directly into the Lenovo global structure. And more crucially, they structurally neutralized the financial panic that always accompanies an acquisition.
By matching compensation, right?
Yeah, exactly. They absorbed the IBM employees and guaranteed their existing American salary structures.
Wow.
Yeah, that singular HR decision immediately halted the mass exodus of intellectual property.
But the structural integration went much deeper than just financial retention. They took Stephen Ward, an American who'd been running the IBM PC division, and installed him as the CEO of the new global Lenovo.
Which is a staggering signal to send to the market.
Right. It communicates absolute meritocracy and trust.
It completely dismantles the assumption that the acquiring nation will just monopolize the leadership. And they reinforce this by constructing a 30-member top management team deliberately split between Chinese and American executives.
They forced the integration at the highest echelon of power.
They did.
And then they implemented what I find to be like the most fascinating piece of organizational innovation in this entire case. They mandated English as the official language of Lenovo's global business operations.
It's brilliant.
I mean, they're a Chinese company headquartered in Beijing, and they unilaterally decide that their internal nervous system will operate in English.
Because that decision bypasses decades of potential communication friction. It forces a unified corporate culture. It levels the playing field, ensuring that the legacy IBM staff and the legacy Lenovo staff share a common operational framework.
Okay, let's unpack this. How do we take the Lenovo success story and turn it into a blueprint you can use on your exam?
Well, when you're analyzing this for your strategic management cases, the takeaway is clear. Lenovo became the third largest personal computer firm globally, not because they bought better plastic or silicon.
They won because they deployed IHRM as a weapon of integration.
Exactly. They hired capable people, standardized the language, mixed the leadership, and retained the intellectual capital.
But executing that kind of global integration requires a fundamental understanding of the environment. Before a firm can deploy talent across borders, it has to map the terrain.
And the environment of international HRM is structurally distinct from domestic operations. It's a completely different game.
So let's break down that playing field, domestic versus international HRM.
The foundational difference lies in the sheer complexity of the operating variables. Domestic HRM operates within a single, unified legal system.
Right.
The cultural framework is largely consistent. The labor market dynamics, the tax codes, union regulations, they're all relatively stable over time.
All right, so isn't HR just HR everywhere? I mean, you hire, you pay, you evaluate.
It seems like that, but it's not.
It sounds like domestic HR is driving on a well-paid highway you commute on every day, while international HR is off-roading in a different country where the traffic laws change every mile.
That is a perfect analogy. Because the moment a firm crosses a national boundary, the model fractures into what the sources categorize as the three distinct national entities of international HRM.
Okay, for the exam, you need to memorize these. The three countries.
Right. You have the parent country, the host country, and the third country. The architecture of the global firm is built on these three pillars.
Let's define them.
The parent country is the firm's origin, the seat of corporate headquarters. So in our previous example, pre-merger Lenovo's parent country was China.
Got it.
The host country is the target destination for a branch or subsidiary. If an American automotive manufacturer establishes an assembly plant in Bavaria, Germany becomes the host country.
Okay, that makes sense. But the third country concept is where the logistical complexity really compounds, doesn't it?
Oh, immensely.
I assume this refers to the sprawling nature of modern supply chains and talent pools. Like, if that same American auto manufacturer operating in Germany decides to recruit specialized software engineers from India and imports raw lithium from Australia, both India and Australia act as third countries within their HR ecosystem.
Exactly. And the international HR manager is suddenly tasked with harmonizing the labor laws of the United States, the intense Works Council regulations of Germany, the visa and recruitment protocols of India, and the contract laws of Australia.
All simultaneously.
All at the same time.
Let me frame this strategically for you guys listening. Operating in a domestic HR environment is somewhat akin to playing chess on a standard two-dimensional board. The rules of movement are fixed. A knight moves the same way regardless of which square it occupies.
Right, it's predictable.
You can anticipate your opponent's moves because the constraints are universal. International HR is essentially playing three-dimensional chess. where the board is stacked on multiple tiers and the rules of movement change depending on which tier a piece is located.
The gravity shifts depending on the level.
Precisely. A compensation strategy that functions perfectly on the parent country tier might be legally prohibited or deeply culturally offensive on the host country tier.
And the sources emphasize this by highlighting two massive sensitivities unique to international HRM: a significantly higher exposure to risk and a profound vulnerability to the external environment.
Two sensitivities. Write those down. Higher risk, external environment.
Because the external environment in a global context is relentlessly volatile, we're talking about asymmetric legal frameworks where a contract dispute in one nation is handled entirely differently than in another.
And we're dealing with wildly varying levels of economic development, too.
Exactly. Sudden currency devaluations that can wipe out the value of a compensation package overnight. Or shifting political regimes that can rewrite labor laws without any warning.
The international manager must be highly skilled at risk mitigation.
Absolutely essential.
Which transitions us perfectly into the core strategic dilemma of the multinational corporation. You understand the board is multi-tiered and highly volatile. So the existential question then becomes, who do you put in the driver's seat?
How do you staff this operation?
Right. And the sources refer to this as the war for talent.
The terminology is aggressive because the stakes are absolute. Firms are engaged in intense global competition to identify, recruit, and secure individuals who possess not just technical proficiency, but the specific cognitive flexibility to thrive in that volatile environment.
They need people who can handle the off-roading.
Exactly. And the selection mechanisms are exhaustive: deep behavioral interviews, rigorous assessment centers, psychological profiling, all designed to ensure cultural alignment with the firm.
And once that talent is acquired, the overarching architecture of how they are deployed is governed by three primary international staffing policies.
This is the core exam framework.
Yes, if there's one section you memorize, it's this. The three staffing policies: ethnocentric, polycentric, and geocentric. Analyzing the strategic intent, the advantages, and the severe limitations of each is critical. Let's deconstruct the ethnocentric policy first.
The core mechanic here is centralization.
Right. In an ethnocentric staffing model, the parent company maintains an absolute monopoly on leadership. Every key management position across the globe, every subsidiary director, every regional head country is filled by an expatriate sent from the parent country.
The strategy is tight control.
But why? Why would anyone do that if it risks local resentment? The immediate strategic rationale seems heavily tied to control and knowledge transfer.
Yes. If a highly advanced manufacturing firm from a developed economy opens a facility in an emerging market, they might perceive a critical skills gap in the local labor pool.
So they just bring their own people.
Right. The perceived lack of qualified host country nationals is a frequent driver. But beyond simply filling a skills gap, ethnocentricity is a mechanism for rigorous cultural preservation.
The texts explicitly cite Japanese multinational firms as historical proponents of this policy, don't they?
They do. By staffing foreign subsidiaries exclusively with Japanese expatriates, they guarantee that the very specific behavioral norms, the intense loyalty structures, and the communication protocols of the parent company are replicated exactly in the host country.
It's like bringing your entire hometown crew to open a restaurant in a new country. The recipe stays perfectly intact, but the locals might resent that they can never become the head chef.
That's exactly the dynamic. It is a closed-loop system for transferring tacit knowledge. If you're dealing with incredibly sensitive, highly proprietary scientific technology, sending your own parent country engineers ensures that the technological integrity is maintained.
And the communication bandwidth between the subsidiary and headquarters is massive because they share the same cultural and corporate language. The headquarters essentially extends its own nervous system into the host country.
Plus, it serves as a powerful developmental pipeline for parent country executives. An international posting becomes like a prerequisite for upper management back at headquarters.
But there's a catch. The structural flaws of the ethnocentric model are profound. By monopolizing leadership, you are artificially capping the career trajectory of every single host country employee.
You're building an impenetrable glass ceiling.
Right, and the resentment that generates is toxic to organizational performance.
It is. Host country nationals realize quickly that regardless of their output or brilliance, they will never ascend beyond middle management. So productivity stagnates.
And what about the expatriates themselves?
Well, the failure rate of those parent country managers is incredibly high because they frequently collide with host country government regulations and cultural nuances they simply cannot interpret. They apply the parent country playbook to a host country reality, and the system breaks.
So if the structural flaw of ethnocentricity is cultural blindness and local resentment, the logical counter-strategy is the polycentric model.
The architecture reverses entirely.
Under a polycentric policy, the subsidiary is handed over entirely to host country employees. They run the local operations, while the parent country managers remain at headquarters.
The strategy here shifts to local empowerment.
And the immediate strategic advantage has to be the cost structure.
Yeah.
I mean, if a multinational firm headquartered in San Francisco opens an operations center in Manila, the cost of deploying a Silicon Valley executive with the relocation premiums, the housing allowances, the tax equalization, it's astronomical.
It's a massive capital drain.
Yeah.
By utilizing a polycentric model, the firm instantly capitalizes on the prevailing local market wages.
The variable labor costs drop drastically.
But the advantages extend beyond the balance sheet. Host country managers possess native fluency in the local environment. They inherently understand the unwritten cultural rules of negotiation, consumer preferences, and the regulatory labyrinth.
They bypass the culture shock entirely.
Exactly.
And I imagine the host government is far more amenable to a foreign firm that is visibly elevating local citizens into executive roles rather than importing foreign overlords.
Very much so. It aligns with local economic development goals, which can potentially unlock tax incentives or subsidized infrastructure like housing schemes. It creates immense goodwill.
But the polycentric model introduces a severe strategic vulnerability, right?
It does. Fragmentation.
The silo effect.
Exactly. You create a federation of highly independent, localized fiefdoms. The host country managers are brilliant at dominating their local market, but they often lack exposure to the broader global strategy of the firm.
And conversely, the parent country managers at headquarters become increasingly isolated from the realities of the subsidiaries.
The communication bandwidth shrinks. The parent company speaks one strategic language, the subsidiary speaks another.
This implies that if a firm's overarching strategy depends on global standardization, like if they need to sell the exact same product with the exact same marketing at the exact same quality standard in 40 different countries, a polycentric model would be catastrophic.
Right, because the local managers would constantly attempt to customize the product. They'd destroy the economies of scale. The polycentric firm sacrifices global integration at the altar of local responsiveness.
Which leaves us with the third paradigm, the model Lenovo utilized, the geocentric staffing policy.
The absolute meritocracy.
The geocentric approach ignores the passport entirely. The firm actively recruits and deploys the most capable individual for any given role globally, irrespective of whether they originate from the parent, host, or a third country.
It's the most efficient theoretical utilization of human resources. You're no longer constrained by the talent pool of a single nation.
And by constantly circulating top talent across the globe, you construct a truly transnational corporate culture.
A unified cadre of executives who identify primarily with the firm rather than their nation of origin.
The sources highlight specific sectors where this model is heavily favored, notably telecommunications and internet-based firms. Analyzing why reveals a key strategic framework.
Let's look at that framework.
Right, so in the software or telecom sector, the product is largely uniform worldwide. A search engine interface or a smartphone operating system doesn't require deep cultural customization.
The pressure for local responsiveness is incredibly low.
While the pressure for global efficiency and cost-cutting standardization is immense, the geocentric model builds the standardized information management networks necessary to run that machine.
But, and this is a big but, the friction costs of the geocentric model are staggering.
It's incredibly expensive.
It is. To maintain a truly global talent pool, you must implement global compensation structures, which means elevating salaries worldwide to remain competitive.
Plus, the logistical costs of constantly relocating executives across borders, securing visas in highly restrictive immigration environments, and providing the massive, continuous cross-cultural training required to make diverse teams function without tearing each other apart.
It's an incredible drain on capital, and it essentially strips the individual subsidiary of its autonomy, centralizing power back into this roaming global elite.
So, synthesizing this for your exam context, you cannot simply define these three policies. Don't just list them. You must dictate their strategic application. Argue when to use them.
That's the key to top marks.
Right. Standardized global tech product. Go geocentric. Need to save money and adapt to a local culture. Polycentric. Transferring highly sensitive scientific tech. Ethnocentric.
Mastering that application demonstrates a sophisticated grasp of organizational design.
But let's say you choose ethnocentric or geocentric, which means you are sending people abroad. Both require the physical relocation of human beings across national borders.
Yeah.
They require the creation of an expatriate.
And this is where the theoretical architecture frequently collides violently with human psychology.
Expatriate failure and culture shock.
It is the most costly and complex vulnerability in international HRM.
Let's define an expatriate for a second. It's simply a non-national working in a host country. But the data presented in the sources regarding the premature return rate is staggering.
It's a massive problem.
When a multinational corporation invests massive resources into selecting a high-performing executive from headquarters, relocates them, and that executive quits or is dismissed before the end of their contract, the system has failed.
And the data specifically highlights an anomaly. The failure rate for U.S. multinational employees deployed to developing nations is disproportionately high compared to deployments between developed nations.
Which indicates that the failure is not merely a lack of general business acumen. It's a catastrophic breakdown in the face of environmental friction.
The sources meticulously outline 6 distinct structural and psychological traps. This is a mental checklist for the listener's exam.
Let's walk through them. Instead of just listing these 6 reasons, let's explore how these traps compound and interact. The sources identify these variables: pressure and isolation, culture shock, emotional immaturity, sudden responsibility spikes, physical breakdown, and lack of technical competence.
Let's look at the specific example provided in the text to ground this. The German information technology manager relocated to Malaysia.
Oh, this scenario perfectly illustrates the cascading nature of expatriate failure.
It's a brilliant illustration of the competence trap. Often, firms select expatriates based entirely on the 6th variable, technical competence.
Right, the German IT manager is selected because his code is flawless and his domestic department runs efficiently. He bypasses the technical failure trap.
But the firm completely ignores the architecture of the new role. In Germany, this individual manages a highly predictable, culturally homogeneous team of 15 people.
And then he's deployed to Malaysia to oversee a regional hub.
And overnight, his direct reports expand to 100 people across diverse cultural backgrounds.
This is the sudden responsibility spike. The sheer scale of the management requirement increases 7-fold.
And the domestic skills that made him successful, perhaps a highly direct, detail-oriented micromanagement style, they just don't scale to a 100-person team.
And more importantly, they may violently clash with the cultural expectations of authority in Malaysia.
Which instantly triggers the next trap: culture shock and cultural inflexibility. He is suddenly operating in an environment where communication styles are indirect, where saving face might be prioritized over blunt efficiency, and where the unwritten rules of corporate hierarchy are deeply unfamiliar.
His traditional management levers no longer work. The frustration mounts.
To compensate for the lack in cultural traction and the massive new workload, the expatriate falls into the physical breakdown trap. Driven by the pressure of the highly lucrative financial package tied to the assignment or maybe promotions, he attempts to brute force the problem.
He works 80-hour weeks.
The physical toll of the climate, the unfamiliar diet, and the relentless stress rapidly deplete his cognitive reserves.
And because he's exhausted and failing to move the needle, the psychological traps engage. He is geographically severed from his support network. If his family didn't accompany him, or if his spouse is deeply unhappy in the new environment, the pressure and isolation become overwhelming.
The texts note that marital stress is a massive primary driver of premature return. It leads to profound loneliness.
Finally, the structural pressure reveals the underlying emotional immaturity.
The inability to handle the emotional toll of relocation. The individual lacks the psychological resilience, the emotional regulation required to process failure, adapt, and learn in a foreign context.
The cascading failure is complete. The executive demands to return to the safety of the 15-person team in Munich, and the firm absorbs a multi-million-dollar loss in relocation costs, disrupted operations, and damaged local morale.
It's brutal.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you MBA students. We assume business is just about spreadsheets. But expatriate failure shows us that marriage stress and food habits can literally cost a multinational corporation millions of dollars. The soft psychological variables are entirely determinative of the hard financial outcomes.
Which means the HR department cannot leave adaptation to chance. The intervention must be systemic, structured, and comprehensive.
The intervention is Training. So how does an MBA-level HR director mitigate this risk before the employee ever gets on the plane? Not with standard domestic corporate compliance training.
No, to immunize the expatriate against the cascading failure we just mapped out, the firm must engineer a completely new cognitive framework within the manager. The sources outline 3 tactical layers of training required before deployment.
Let's break those down.
The foundational layer is cultural training. This is not a superficial briefing on etiquette. It requires deep historical, political, and religious context.
The manager must understand the macroeconomic structure of the host country, the religious underpinnings of its social interactions, and the historical context of its business practices.
And the most effective mechanism for this is the pre-deployment trip.
Right.
A theoretical understanding of culture is insufficient. The manager has to experience the sensory and operational friction of the environment firsthand before the stakes are absolute.
The second layer is linguistic training. The inability to communicate is the most rapid catalyst for isolation and failure.
The texts emphasize that in major strategic markets, they specified China and Japan here, the expectation and preference for conducting business in the native language are paramount.
A manager attempting to operate exclusively through translators remains permanently on the periphery of the actual power dynamics and informal networks of the subsidiary.
Which circles back to the genius of Lenovo's strategy. By mandating English globally, they effectively neutralize the linguistic failure trap for their entire operation.
But for firms that do not possess the leverage to dictate a global language, intensive language training is a non-negotiable expense.
Exactly.
The third tactical layer is often overlooked by strategists, yet it is the most vital for day-to-day survival: practical training.
Right. This concerns the logistical reality of existence. It's helping the expat and their family integrate into the social structure and food habits.
It's not about how to negotiate a contract. It's about how to function as a human being in a foreign society. How does the family unit procure groceries that align with their dietary needs? How do they navigate the complexities of the local healthcare system?
How do they secure adequate educational facilities for their children?
Right. Because if the family unit's practical existence is chaotic, the executive's professional focus will inevitably shatter.
But these 3 layers, cultural, linguistic, practical, are ultimately just tactical tools. They're the mechanisms used to achieve a much higher strategic objective.
The ultimate goal of this immense investment is the cultivation of a global mindset.
And this concept of the global mindset is a centerpiece of the academic literature on IHRM. It elevates the discussion from simple survival tactics to advanced strategic leadership.
Let's bring in the heavy hitters from the text for the exam: academic definitions. The sources provide 2 deeply analytical definitions of this concept. Let's unpack the first, proposed by Kadia and Mukherjee in 1999.
Kadia and Mukherjee define a global mindset as the manager's cognitive ability to realize their firm's profound interdependence on the global economy. And this realization is backed by the specific knowledge and skills to act upon it.
Importantly, they note this is essential even if the firm's immediate activities seem confined to a domestic market.
The concept of structural interdependence is vital here. It means the manager ceases to view the firm as a contained national entity.
Even if a supply chain manager operates entirely within the American Midwest, a global mindset dictates that they understand how a minor fluctuation in the Asian credit markets or a shift in European maritime law will inevitably cascade down and disrupt their local operations.
They see the invisible threads connecting local action to global reactions. It's the eradication of siloed thinking.
But Kadia and Mukherjee emphasize that awareness is sterile without the requisite skills to maneuver within that interdependence.
Right. And the second definition from Rhinesmith in 1993 is even more expansive. Rhinesmith posits that a global mindset is not merely a collection of skills, it's a fundamental way of being.
Wait, is a global mindset just having a bunch of stamps in your passport and knowing how to order coffee in 5 languages?
No, not at all. It's an epistemological shift in how the individual processes reality. Rhinesmith argues it's the capacity to scan the world from an exceptionally broad perspective, actively seeking out unexpected trends and synthesizing seemingly unrelated data points.
It's the ability to manage profound uncertainty, to balance inherently competing tensions, like the constant pull between global standardization and local responsiveness, and to remain highly functional in highly ambiguous environments.
When you combine these definitions, you realize a global mindset is essentially advanced cognitive complexity. It requires deep knowledge of international geopolitics, complex social architectures, and emerging technologies.
The strategic value of a management cadre possessing this mindset is immeasurable. They can anticipate global shocks and identify transnational opportunities that a domestically oriented competitor would completely miss.
But the critical question for the HR architect is how to actually construct this mindset. You can't simply lecture someone into acquiring a new way of being.
So how do you do it? The text points to the research of Gregerson, Morrison, and Black from 1998. They identified a systematic four-pillar architecture for developing this cognitive complexity within an organization.
Let's break down Gregerson et al.'s actionable ways. The first pillar is consistent, meaningful foreign travel. Not superficial site visits, but deep immersion into varying market dynamics.
The second pillar is the structural establishment of diverse, multinational teams. By forcing individuals from divergent cultural backgrounds to collaboratively solve complex problems, you mandate acculturation and shatter ethnocentric biases.
The third pillar encompasses the rigorous, targeted training programs we just analyzed, the specific training programs to upgrade cultural and linguistic bandwidth.
And the fourth pillar is the ultimate crucible, foreign transfers, the actual transfer of employees into foreign assignments. The expatriate experience itself, when properly supported, is the most powerful forge for a global mindset.
So if we trace the life cycle of our international operation, we understand the volatile environment, we have chosen our staffing policy, we have navigated the traps of expatriate failure by deploying rigorous training and cultivating a global mindset.
Okay, you've trained them, they have a global mindset, and they are working abroad. Now comes the hardest part of a manager's job. Figuring out if they are actually doing a good job and how much to pay them.
This leads us to the most complex structural dilemma in the entire field of IHRM, performance appraisal and global compensation.
Let's start with the scorecard. Performance appraisal is the central nervous system of accountability. The text references Williams, 1999, who models performance management across three integrated dimensions.
The Williams framework dictates that the system must evaluate organizational performance, the macroeconomic health of the entity.
It must evaluate manager and employee performance, the micro-level output.
And critically, it must evaluate the integration of the two, the precise vector by which the individual's specific actions directly drive the organization's overarching goals.
This appraisal data dictates the entirety of the employee's future: salary, placements, promotions, dismissals, and feedback.
But the architecture of international HRM introduces a profound agency problem into this appraisal process, the issue of cross-country distance.
The geographical and operational chasm between the evaluator and the evaluated.
Precisely. The executives at headquarters, tasked with conducting the appraisal, suffer from an immense deficit of local context. They are blind to the daily operational friction, the subtle regulatory victories, and the nuanced cultural navigation occurring on the ground in the foreign subsidiary.
Because they can't observe the process, they become entirely reliant on the outputs.
They default back to the X-ray. They rely heavily on hard data.
Hard data provides the illusion of objective control. It encompasses the universally legible quantitative metrics: gross profitability, market share percentages, raw productivity output, and total sales volume.
But the strategic flaw here is massive. By relying solely on hard data to evaluate an expatriate operating in a volatile external environment, the firm systematically ignores the most critical variables of international management.
Evaluating someone purely on hard data is like grading a teacher strictly on standardized test scores, completely ignoring the soft variables, like the fact that they built an amazing culture or mentored a struggling student. In IHRM, companies often don't pay a dime for those soft variables.
And the text explicitly states that this approach entirely disregards those soft variables. The highly complex management skills required to diffuse a labor strike, the emotional intelligence necessary to build a cohesive cross-cultural team, the political acumen used to negotiate with a hostile local government.
These soft variables are the actual drivers of long-term sustainability and performance in a host country.
Yet, because headquarters cannot quantify them on a quarterly spreadsheet, they frequently assign them zero financial value in the appraisal process.
The expatriate could be executing brilliant, organization-saving structural work in a market experiencing a severe local recession. The hard data will show declining sales, and headquarters will penalize the manager for failing, entirely blind to the soft skills that prevented a total collapse.
It's a deeply flawed feedback loop. And this tension in appraisal bleeds directly into the explosive complexities of global compensation.
Let's talk about the money. The disparities in global compensation are staggering. The source text provides a stark comparative baseline. A human resources executive operating in the United States commands a total compensation package of approximately $525,923.
Over $500,000.
However, an HR executive holding the identical post, executing the same strategic responsibilities within Malaysia, receives a total compensation of $140,587.
The magnitude of that pay gap, nearly $400,000 for the exact same intellectual output, it creates massive structural friction.
But strategically, why does this matter for the exam?
If you use an ethnocentric or polycentric policy, this pay gap isn't a massive issue. In a polycentric model, host country managers are siloed and benchmarked entirely against their local labor market. The firm can justify paying the Malaysian executive the local prevailing wage.
The internal inequity is hidden by the localized structure.
But the strategic implication shifts violently if the firm claims to operate a geocentric transnational model.
Right, if you're preaching a unified global culture, demanding a global mindset, and constantly integrating diverse multinational teams, you cannot simultaneously enforce a compensation architecture based purely on geographic origin.
Paying two executives on the same global management team drastically different salaries simply because of their passport or location is highly biased. It destroys the unified corporate culture you spent millions trying to build. It breeds catastrophic resentment.
Which is why the trajectory of truly transnational firms is moving aggressively toward global standard pay scales.
In these advanced models, executives within the global cadre receive standardized base salaries, uniform bonus structures, and equivalent benefits, irrespective of their nationality or current geographic deployment.
But the immediate logistical nightmare arises for expatriates specifically. When you physically relocate an executive from that global cadre, when you pull them out of their home environment and drop them into a wildly different economic reality, how do you pay them fairly without bankrupting the firm or impoverishing the executive?
The sources detail the industry standard architecture for this, the balance sheet approach.
Can you outline the balance sheet approach for us?
The mechanical objective of the balance sheet approach is equalization. It's based on purchasing power parity, or PPP. The goal is to ensure the expat enjoys the exact same lifestyle abroad as they do at home.
It's designed to make the relocation financially neutral for the employee. The complexity lies in calculating that parity. The balance sheet is constructed of four primary pillars. The first is the base salary.
This remains tethered to the home country equivalent, ensuring the executive's fundamental baseline value within the corporation does not fluctuate based on assignment location.
The second pillar is the foreign service premium.
This is independent of living costs. It's a direct financial incentive, a hardship bonus just for moving, paid explicitly to induce the executive to accept the disruption and risk of an international deployment.
The third pillar is where the accounting becomes incredibly dense, the allowances. These are the highly variable financial levers used to achieve that purchasing power parity.
You have the housing allowance, bridging the gap between property costs in, say, Houston versus central Tokyo. You have the cost of living allowance, neutralizing the differential in daily consumer goods.
You also have the hardship allowance, which scales up dramatically if the host country poses significant physical or political risks.
And critically, the educational allowance for kids. The firm must absorb the exorbitant costs of international private schools to ensure the expatriates' children receive an education equivalent to their home country standard.
Without this, the executive pool with families is instantly alienated. And they also provide medical and pension equivalents.
Finally, the fourth pillar, and arguably the most administratively complex, taxation details.
Right. An expatriate moving across borders frequently triggers overlapping jurisdictional claims on their income. The texts differentiate between reciprocal and non-reciprocal tax systems.
In a non-reciprocal environment, the executive is only liable for taxation in the host country.
But in a reciprocal tax system, the executive is legally obligated to file and pay income taxes to both their parent country and the host country simultaneously.
Paying both home and host country. Double taxation would instantly vaporize the executive's entire compensation package.
Therefore, the firm must implement tax equalization. The firm effectively pays the excess tax burden to both sovereign entities on behalf of the employee, ensuring the executive's actual take-home pay mirrors their domestic expectation.
When you aggregate the base salary, the premiums, the sprawling allowances, the tax equalization, and the maintenance of equivalent medical and pension benefits, the total capital outlay is astronomical.
It perfectly illustrates why the geocentric model, while strategically superior for global standardization, is the most capital-intensive organizational structure in existence.
It really is. Every concept we've discussed is inextricably linked. The overarching strategy dictates the staffing policy. The staffing policy dictates the risk of failure.
Mitigating that risk requires massive investments in training and global mindset development, and the deployment of that mindset requires highly complex, deeply nuanced appraisal and compensation architectures.
It is a continuous, highly integrated loop of organizational innovation.
So, what does this all mean for you sitting down with your test paper? Let's summarize your ultimate exam toolkit. You now know how to distinguish domestic from international HR, the 3 countries, and 2 sensitivities.
You understand the exact pros and cons of the 3 staffing policies, ethno, poly, geo.
You know the 6 traps of expatriate failure, how to build a global mindset using Gregerson's 4 pillars, and the critical tension between hard data appraisals and the balance sheet approach to compensation. You have the complete blueprint.
You are definitely ready.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought, a thread to pull on that extends beyond the current source material and touches on the immediate future of your careers.
The evolution of the discipline.
Yes. We talked about how HQ relies on hard data because of distance, ignoring the soft skills that actually hold an international team together. They can't see the manager diffusing a cultural crisis, so they don't value it.
But consider the current trajectory of enterprise technology. The collapse of distance through artificial intelligence and remote monitoring.
Exactly. As AI-driven communication platforms, real-time sentiment analysis, and advanced remote collaboration tools became ubiquitous, physical cross-country distance is rapidly disappearing as an operational barrier.
Headquarters will soon have the capability to monitor the daily digital interactions, the communication efficacy, and the cultural cohesion of a subsidiary in real time.
So, as you step into your MBA exams and your future career, ask yourself this. As AI and remote monitoring technologies advance, will cross-country distance disappear? And if it does, will we finally figure out a way to put a hard dollar value on a manager's soft cultural skills?
That is the ultimate frontier of organizational innovation, quantifying the human element.
When the X-ray machine evolves enough to capture not just the structural bones of the operation, but the actual rhythm of the corporate culture, the rules of IHRM will be rewritten entirely. Keep your eye on that horizon. Good luck on your exams. You're going to crush them.